Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to our 5th Industry Insights event, which is being hosted in line with Birmingham City University's Photography Graduate Showcase for 2021. For today's Industry Insights event, I will be in conversation with Wendy Ewald on the aesthetics of collaboration. So Wendy, I'm just going to read a quick bio for you. But yeah.
Does this sound okay, Nathan?
Yeah, sounds perfect. Video's perfect. Everything's perfect. But just a quick intro. Wendy Ewald is an American photographer who works internationally on projects with children, families, workers, women, and teachers. The United States, Colombia, India, South Africa, Mexico, and Tanzania are just a few countries she has visited for her projects. Her work starts as documentary investigations and then later leads on to probing questions of identity and cultural differences. Wendy's projects with children encourages the use of cameras to document and look at their own lives, families, and communities. Wendy has a catalogue of awards, publications, features, and international exhibitions, such as the Guggenheim Fellowship, Honoured Educator of the Year from the Society of Photographic Education. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. Her images have also been exhibited all across the United States, and Wendy has photographs held in the collections of numerous institutions across the United States as well. So thank you so much for joining me today, Wendy. I know we've spoke before previously, but it's great to be able to speak to you again and hear more about your practice and projects. And I'm sure the rest of my cohort and anyone who watches this recording will really enjoy it as well. You're on mute.
Thank you.
There you go. Is there anything you want to add to that intro, or are you okay to should we dive straight in?
No, but it's interesting. I'm, about the United States, because I mean, I have done lots of things but in English-speaking countries, in Australia and the UK, and
yeah,
etc. Anyway, I always think that's interesting.
So just to dive, go on, sorry.
No, that it's remained in an English-speaking
right. Okay, cool.
world.
For sure. So just to dive straight in, I think it would be really nice for you to briefly maybe just discuss or just mention what your practice is actually about and what you do. So like what occurs within your projects.
Well, I mean, they attempt to be all different, from, the situation that I look for or find myself in. But then they've evolved over the years, over many years, because I started working with Native Americans in 1969, although they were First Nations in Canada, in Labrador. And then, that was fascinating to me. I brought cameras, Polaroid cameras and film there to share with the students I would be working with that summer. And I realized pretty quickly that the way that they were making pictures was very different than the way I'd seen other people make pictures or the way that I made pictures. So, that led me to keep working on that project all through my college years. And then went on afterwards to work in Kentucky in a community that was it was an artist community called Apple Shop, that where people of different artistic persuasions worked, but they were mostly all from the region. So the idea was to try to see how it looked from people's perspective who lived in the region or who grew up in the region. So that kind of led me to, what are the different ways I can think of to work with people to make things that were a different way of looking at that place than people had seen before. For example, with the First Nations communities that I worked with, people really hadn't in the US and in Canada really hadn't really seen images from their perspective before. So that was quite, exciting, and it was something I kind of stumbled on, but I realized, how important that was, I guess, and how important it was to the people that I was working with. So at a certain point in my career life, I said, oh, I guess this is what I'm going to do. This is what my path is going to be. But, it certainly didn't start out that way. In Kentucky, which was in Appalachia, there's also a very distinct part of the US with a distinct culture, which comes from, Scotland, Ireland, the UK. And so it was really interesting to see what pictures those young people would take, and also what stories they would tell. And I did my first book then, called Portraits and Dreams, that was done in eventually published in 1985. And but I think the idea is twofold, really. One is to create work. It's how I want to make not just documentary, but creative work. I want to do it with other people and be transparent about my part in the creation, but also to make a process of working together that was a pedagogical process that led to ways of affecting curriculums in different places I've lived or worked. So it's kind of a mixture of many different things, and all of them are important to me, and I think they're important to the communities that I work in too.
Definitely, so important, I think. Did you have you recently just republished the Portraits and Dreams book?
Yeah, it was, let's see, 1976 to 82, I think, that I worked there. And in the last year, I finished a film about the students that I worked with, and the process that we went through then, and then seeing them now. At the same time, we republished the book, but it was also an updated and expanded version, so that you heard from the kids about what it meant to them when they were doing it, but also how they saw photography and how photography had influenced their lives. So that was really interesting for me to see, and some of it was very painful, and some of it was very exciting.
It must have been really interesting, because how many years ago? That's over 30.
Yeah, I mean, they were in their 50s now, and then when
Wow.
they were working with me, they were
Children.
Yeah, 11,
Wow.
12, 13, something like that.
Wow, that's incredible. So most of the life really is the
Yeah,
difference. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and they remembered so much.
Yeah.
So that was...
And it must have had, that project must have had such a, huge effect on them, going forward in their life as well. Must have been really significant for them.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that is interesting is that we worked together for 4 or 5 years. So I was with them for, they were different age levels, but I was with them for quite a while, many years of their critical time growing up. And to meet them again, it was very interesting, because there was a lot of the same kind of back and forth and memories of each other and kidding around, and that was there when they were young, and so it was easy to pick up and move on.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it must have been like really lovely to see on your part as well, because when you were doing the project with them, they were children, and then now it must be really sentimental for you as well.
Yeah. And a lot of them had done really well. I mean, it was sort of a real mixed bag. I mean, I think they're all incredible human beings. And, some of them had a harder time than others. But I think they're really significant people, and the way they see the world is very significant.
Definitely. Just to move on, the artist talk is called On the Aesthetics of Collaboration. So could you just like define what would you say what is the aesthetics of collaboration?
Well, I think it's a word that's, everybody uses now. I mean, nobody used it when I started out. But I think it really is a lot about listening and looking, really, and trying to understand who the people are that you're with and you're working with, and how to create a process that you can work together on something that allows both of us to acknowledge who each other are. It's not something that can be predetermined. It's like making a painting in some way. You start out and in one place, with one idea, and then you move, and then you respond to what's been done, and then you paint more, and then you respond to what's been done, and you keep going like that, this back and forth, until you all decide, well, when is it done? And that changes, of course. And when I was working with the kids in Kentucky in the 70s, I knew at one point that I was going to leave, and I was actually going to go to Colombia in South America to work. And so we decided that to make a book, and that was a process of, I was very interested in them understanding what it was to make a book, or what the different steps were, and questions. And so I started off by inviting an editor to come to work with the students, so that they understood something about how you edit a book, how you choose images, and how you edited a book. And then I invited a designer to come to work with them on actually making books. And she ended up designing the book in 1985, I guess it was. And she designed the book that was published last year as well. And so I guess to me, some of the aesthetics is to figure out a process that is inclusive and exciting. And it's as exciting for me as it is for them. I taught them, something about where we discussed the history of bookmaking, and I brought them materials, and I had just done my first book, so they were able to look at the sheets that were printed. And so it was, they were very engrossed in the whole situation. And our classroom was really a studio, and they did lots of different art forms. Whatever they were interested in, we worked on, whether it was, like linoleum prints, or writing stories, or reading stories, or, just to follow them and their ideas. And, they never disappointed me. They were always challenging.
So from what I can gather is your projects, say Portraits and Dreams, it's not just about the imagery, it's not just photography and taking photographs. From what you've just said, there's all these other components to it as well, which is makes it, I suppose that's what makes it so significant and such a strong project. And I suppose the very fact that it lasted so long, in fact, you worked 5 years with these children, which is such a long time. And
Yeah.
I suppose you must have been going back and forth with imagery. I suppose you had to. So you must have had so many images from the children.
Yeah, I'm working on my archive now, and now I go back and see all these. It's amazing. I mean, all the work that I have, and yeah, no, it was it was challenging. But it's not any different than any photographer. That's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
Is none of us who are creative photographers, I don't think just focus on the image. I mean, some people do more than others, but it's who we are as seers and human beings that bring about the pictures that we make. And they had very rich lives all of the students I did, but living in the countryside and growing animals, and they were close to death and birth, and so they had so much to work out of. Even for young people, they had a lot to work out of, and of course, as we get older, we have more to work out of. But these kids were really, and many of the kids I worked with were really close to the land, which is gives a really richness, I think, to the images. But I am a photographer, and what excites me most are images, but also images in words too, because some of the things that are in Portraits and Dreams, some of the things that actually were recordings I made with them, are really profound and poetic. And some kids are more, or some people are more, verbal, and some are more visual. But they're both, describing their lives and their goals and what moves them.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have that information in the book as well. It just really much contextualizes the images a lot as well. And go on.
No, I had sort of gotten tired of the kind of what I saw as the flatness of photography at some point, and I was much more interested in having a depth to it. That the photography is like a surface art. What you see on the surface is what's considered most important. But I think that if you can create a context, like you were saying, you can understand or have more access to the complexity of it, because it is incredibly complex, but you have to dig deep.
For sure. And just what I was going to say is, even the images, the ones that are more so about the dreams element, even though like the context of those images aren't it's what these children have made up, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even that's so important as well, in terms of like metaphorically, and just to contextualize the images as well. It's just great.
Yeah, because I thought that I wanted them to understand that they could create a world with images, and not just find it. So so I asked them to photograph their dreams or fantasies, and for some kids they didn't really want to do that, but for other kids it was a door opened, and they someone like Denise Dixon, who's one of the kids, who photographed herself and her twin brothers.
Is that the one with the tights over the head? Is it tights?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's stockings.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, stockings.
stockings, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, because she was making creatures from outer space
mm,
out of her small twin brothers, and she was trying all different kinds of material to put over their faces, and then finally, um, you see that she's used these kind of dark stockings,
mm.
and you know, it's great. It's really interesting to see how they're seeing when you have the contact sheets. You know, when you look at their contact sheets, what they shot first, second, third, and how they're working towards their, you know, what they want.
I'm just going to screen share a moment just whilst we're talking, just so I can show that project and just have something visual.
Yeah.
How did you get around those issues and situations with people that weren't that found difficulty with
There's Denise.
the dreams, the fantasies and dreams element? How did you like work around that? Was it difficult, or did you manage to find it?
Well, you know, it's culturally it was really different because I did it in different places. Um, for example, when I did it in South Africa, um, the the African kids who lived in squatter settlement outside of Johannesburg, um, they really didn't want to photograph any dreams or fantasies because the fantasies they said that they'd have were fantasies of one of their you know, relatives being killed in a bus massacre um, while they were commuting to work. Um, Whereas, you know, the kids in Kentucky, they really had quite a good time all photographing, you know, even though this one, I dreamed I killed my best friend, Ricky Dixon, is not a happy picture,
Yeah.
but it was a situation in which they'd had a fight. And then um, Alan, who took the picture, decided to make this picture for his dreams. And so he asked Ricky to pose for him. And in the posing of the picture, the two of them made up and went on and continued to be good friends. Um, and this is Scott Huff, has a flying dream. And he ended up becoming an engineer and has factories in many places around the world. And this is Dolly Parton. This is um, Denise Dixon posing as Dolly Parton, and she's gotten a wig and, you know, this fluffy dress.
This is the one.
Yeah, this is the one with the twins from outer space.
Yeah.
Philip and Jamie are creatures from outer space in their spaceship. And I just love you know, using the chair as the spaceship.
Mm.
And this is Denise. I'm the girl with the snake around her neck. And I think that this is actually Marilyn Monroe. Yeah, Russell Aikman lying on the back of his old horse. So Denise and I have continued to work together. So we did an exhibition in 2020.
Cool. Thank you for sharing all that information about that project. How did you actually stumble across, you know, when did you realize that you wanted to, in your photography, you wanted to provide cameras for children to actually take their images? When did you realize you wanted to do that?
Well, I was in high school, or what you call it, something else.
I say high school, but I think most people say secondary school here.
Secondary school.
Yeah, I usually just say high school though.
Yeah, yeah. I had seen some pictures that young people had taken, and they weren't so incredible, but I thought it was just a really great idea. And also, I'd had a brother that I worked with who was in an accident, and I had worked with him for many years to try and gain his speech, and his walking back. And so I constructed ways of teaching, doing that, and bringing someone along with you, I guess, is the way I saw it. And then Polaroid was giving cameras and film away. Somebody told me that, and so I wrote a proposal to them when I was in high school, and got cameras and film, and that's when I worked with the First Nations children in Canada.
While she was
So,
in high school.
yeah.
Wow. At what
Yeah.
so what age will you have been then?
Oh, I was probably 17, 18, something like that. It was at the end of high school.
Yeah.
But
That's incredible.
yeah. So I was very lucky, very lucky. And then I worked before that. I worked in Detroit after the uprising in Detroit, and with young people who were at risk. And so I worked on visual projects with them. That's not what I was asked to do, but I just figured, oh, this is something I like to do. It's fun to do. So
did you were you living near Labrador, near where the First Nations
I
live?
was there in the summer. And I lived there for 2 months, and then all through college I lived in the summers in First Nations communities.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
And I think definitely within all your projects, there's that element of power dynamics, power structures, and power in general, which is so fascinating to me. Is there anything that you could expand on this aspect of the power dynamics?
Well, it wasn't how I started out, and that wasn't something that people talked about that much, or at least people around me. And so it really came out of the work, understanding the pictures and understanding what I did and the pictures that I took and what pictures they took. And I understood pretty quickly that their voice, or it's not, their vision was really interesting and much more much closer to who they were than anything anybody else could do from the outside. And it wasn't only the subject matter, but it was also how they handled the camera, what they, how they framed things, how they, the point of view, all these pieces of it. So to me, that was their power to handle it and show it in the way that they wanted. And it was so much more complex, because I think as photographers, and me included, growing up, you learn how to put a lens on what you see. You learn how to develop your own, but also there are certain rules that we learn, especially when we go to art school or wherever we go. And we're taught how to compose, or maybe this is not composed right, or think about this or that. And they were able to do that, by themselves, out of their culture. And it had much more meaning and presence than anything I could do. And then I understood that, it was great for them to be able to do that. But I also think that there's a problem in talking about that, because it was just as important for the people who saw those pictures, who weren't those people, as it is for the people who are making the pictures and have the opportunity, that they might not have had. And that's like the idea of giving voice is to someone who already has a voice is a little difficult. So I think it's important to make a distinction between, those people trying to give an opportunity to those people who are looking at the pictures, to see things in a different way, as well as, the people who are making the pictures being able to let other people know. So, and I really get very, sort of irritated when someone says, oh, you must have made such a difference in, in their lives, not thinking that, oh, you've really made a difference in how I look at this. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Really interesting concept, and how you just elaborated on that is really interesting too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just going to wrap things up now. Yeah, so thank you so much for, joining me today to speak about your practice and, just answer some questions and just elaborate on those things, because I think what you do is so, what you've done is so incredible. Such an amazing, archive of images, and yeah, it's just absolutely phenomenal, and definitely such an inspiration to me and my work. So yeah, thank you so much for joining and being part of our Industry Insights event for our graduate showcase. So thank you.
Well, good luck, and good luck to all of you, and it's going to be interesting what you guys invent.
Definitely.